This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I'm Kara Szymborski. Joining me today is Kait Lamphere, and we've got a very special episode for you all, a book versus book. How are you doing, Kait?
I'm doing great. We read a couple of stories about girls on adventures, which is my favorite genre. So
Uh,
I'm happy to be here.
so shocked that Mike said, I don't know, whatever you guys want to talk about. And it was like, even though we're hundreds of miles away from each other, it was like a mind meld, like
Yeah.
staring into each other's eyes, like, really cool girls.
Yes.
Oh, all right. So uh let's just dive right into it, because this is a very special minisode, and we can make the format whatever we want. We're going to start out just doing quick summaries of the books that we each chose in a book versus book format. Each of the hosts chooses a book that they want demand the other one must read. And we're generally pretty chill with this episode format, and I try to be like as positive as possible about all the books we read. But today I'm feeling salty, Kait. There can only be one. We must choose a book.
Now it's actually like there's a competition.
Now it's a
happening.
competition. So tell me about your pick. What did you choose for us to read, and why?
So this is Junkwraith by Eleanor Richie. A character named Florence throws away a beloved set of ice skates. The ice skates become a Junkwraith, which is like this spirit-looking being that is kind of a partial reflection of Florence herself, like maybe her anger in particular. The Junkwraith leaves the city and escapes into the wastelands. And Florence and her little handheld digital assistant Frank leave the city and venture into the wastelands also. And Florence uncovers research about the Junkwraiths and the digital assistants, and discovers human presence out in the wastelands.
Dun dun dun.
And I picked this because I was engrossed in it. Like when I first read this, which was like maybe early last year, I was kind of blown away by it. Like it's kind of dreamlike. So it's a little bit abstract, I think. I think at one point I had referred to the art as being psychedelic, and I feel like maybe the story is not entirely not psychedelic. But I really enjoyed, like, I love a physical journey in books, and then combined with this kind of like self-reflective, like this Junkwraith is part of Florence, and like it's not very nice, and what does that mean, and why did the ice skates have like such an emotional attachment to her to become this thing. And it was just a nice balance of like a physical thing is happening, but there's self-reflection, and this girl who just like goes off and goes into this dangerous place and by herself to figure it all out.
I feel like the book that I chose is in many ways the opposite to Junkwraith thematically and stylistically. I chose Kaya Volume 1 by Wes Craig, Jason Wordie on colors, Tom Napolitano on letters, and Erica Schnatz on design and production. And Kaya is the half-sister of a prince who was promised, and she's got a mysterious robot arm, and she's got to get her kid brother to safety. And you're thinking, but Kara, this is every chosen one narrative with shades of Hellboy. And I say, yes, but this one has lizard people. so, so let's get into it. Reading Junkwraith for me was interesting because on the surface of it, I was like, I'm going to be so obsessed with this book. I can already tell. It's so beautiful. It's pastels. This is like what my entire wardrobe looks like right now. And, I got to tell you, it was like kind of hard going for me to get through this book because, like you said, it is kind of psychedelic. It felt to me like reading a dream. So I didn't really understand the plot until I read the back cover of the book where it summarized the plot. Then I was like, oh, is that what we were doing? Okay. But
I do feel like there are some parts of this that are kind of out of nowhere. Like you have this through line of like these Junkwraiths and these digital, like little cute, adorable handheld digital assistants with faces. Like they kind of feel like they're phones, but at the same time, they're kind of like teddy bears. So there's this through line of those two things. But then, like, toward the end, especially, like, suddenly she's got a crush on a girl that she knows back home, and the girl is coming after her. And then this other girl is being followed by like a police officer or some detective type person who's trying to figure out, like, the Junkwraiths are only bad and the Junkwraiths are not only bad. Like, yeah, so it got kind of random toward the end.
Yeah, it definitely had a lot of, like you said, it's this girl making her own decisions and then following through on them. Like, she had a lot of agency in this
Yeah.
story. And, I will say that the little personal assistants, the Jujus, were 100%
Yes. Yes.
100% my favorite part. They're like little
Uh-huh.
they're like little sentient light bulbs that are just, like, toddling around on 2 little legs but need to be recharged, and you're just like, "Oh, how charming."
And they know a lot of stuff. Like, they're basically like have access to the internet, except when they don't.
Yeah, it's like Alexa or Siri if they actually had, like, sentience, which
Yeah.
horrifying. Don't like to think about that, but in the book, it's really cute because they have cute
Yeah.
faces, which is exactly how a big corporation would do it.
Oh, no.
Make them think that it was something good. Now I'm getting too dark.
Yeah.
This book is way too light for where I'm going with this. Except no, but this book was very dark because part of the plot that it was difficult for me to wrap my head around was it's like if a junk wraith takes some of your stuff that you've cast aside, it starts like manifesting itself around that memory that you've discarded and therefore like takes your memories. So our heroine runs
Yes.
into like an older librarian who is represented as being like very absent-minded, and then she reveals that she had an encounter with a junk wraith and it like stole her memories, and you find out through the course of the story that there was quite a lot that she doesn't remember. And it I I kind of see what the creator was trying to do with that, whereas if you like cast aside these pieces of yourself like so carelessly, then the consequence of that in this like future fantasy state is you lose the memories that go along with it and lose part of your sense of self. But I'm only really coming to that conclusion now, like talking about it. While I was reading it, I was just like, what is happening and why?
Yeah. That's part of the reason I love being on this show is I feel like talking about putting my ideas on the outside, I guess talking about it helps me connect the pieces. So, but yeah, that's a very good observation.
Yeah. I mean, I did really like the art on this. I thought that the kind of like the choppy line art style to the character shapes and cityscapes really to me suited a teenage narrative about a teenager who felt imperfect and was challenging notions of perfection. Because I was like, ah, you made your protagonist prickly, literally.
Yeah.
Well done.
Nice. Yeah. I really liked I think one of the things that blew me away the most about this book was like the scenery art.
Absolutely.
Like the art of the wastelands, or even like there's a splash page toward the end where you have this little like overland crawler lab thing,
Mm.
and that I loved that. Beautiful design for this rolling building through the wastelands.
No, this one, jumping ahead of myself a little bit with some compare contrast with Kaya, I thought Junkwraith had way more detail and thought in the like physical settings around the characters, like way more noticeable, way more at the forefront. It was almost like you were saying, the wastes are so central to the story. It's not just you're going through this wasteland. You're going through this wasteland that's filled with junk or stuff that might have been junk, and like that's part of the world building is the settings, because you're seeing the discarded things or the discarded people and wondering, how did it get here? Is that
Yeah.
relevant to the story? Perhaps not, but now we're all thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like, how did we get to this like future fantasy state society where discarding things is so deeply frowned upon because they manifest as ghosts who are going to suck your memories away from you.
Right. Yeah. I feel like there's a big element of the story that like I feel like I've seen this a lot in fantasy recently where like you're made to understand that there are certain rules about the way that the world works within the story,
Hmm.
and they are also kind of ingrained in the characters. And then you find out over the course of the story that the rules are not actually the way that everyone understands them to be. And I don't know, I love that that is, I don't want to call it a trope because I feel like it's more of a storytelling device than a stereotype. But I really enjoy how it plays out in this book.
Yeah. I guess my last immediate thought about Junkwraith is I'm so truly baffled about the role of the police detective in this.
Yeah.
Because as you said, like this dude shows up, he's like the mysterious, ominous adult. Also, I will say it took me way too long in this story to realize that our protagonist was a teenager, and I don't know why. Like, I do not have a good reason for why I was just like, this girl is ice skating and lives at home with her parents, but also I'm totally willing to believe that she's just a young adult and not a teenager.
Yeah.
But the detective person witnesses our heroine returning to the scene of the crime where she manifested the junk wraith in the first place by discarding her ice skates. And then he's just like, I'm watching you. And is like, and you like don't know. I like didn't pick up fully on like why he cared so much about junk wraiths to the point where he wanted to leave the city, which is apparently something that people in this world do not do in
Yeah.
order to follow her. And then within the span of like 3 pages later in the book is like, never mind, everything's cool. And I'm like, sir, you had this girl tied up on a rock, which I am pretty sure is not cool, even in this future world where you're from. So, like, what?
Yeah. 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 I feel like, I mean, the only thing that I could think is that like going back to the idea that there are rules in this fantasy world, I feel like he is a representation of that. And so like having him there as a character who's like um who has dialogue to say, "Oh, maybe I was wrong or maybe I have been going about this wrong, maybe my ideas are wrong." I feel like that's just a representation of like the rules of the story being broken, I guess.
I I talk sometimes about how I prefer creators who trust their audience and don't spell everything out, but I do feel like maybe this book could have taken just a few more steps to spell things out a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I'm understanding it now that you're explaining it to me, but while I
I
was
mean, this is just a guess.
it sounds great. That sounds like a great
Okay,
guess. I'm
I know
totally willing
exactly
to
what I'm
believe
talking about.
totally willing to believe that the cop is the manifestation of the rules. That sounds super legit. Great analysis. We both get an A in literature. All right. Well, I wanna talk about Kaya, and then we'll do a little bit more comparison between the two, book versus book. So, so this is a book that was just not on my radar at all. And when we were looking at books to choose, I fortunately stumbled across it and I was like, this looks like something that we'll both get something out of. And at least for me, I was so right. This book is great. So this, like I said, this is Kaya and her half brother, the prince, fleeing their trashed homeland to find safety in the hopes that the half brother prince will one day grow up to be the chosen one who can save the humans from the robot apocalypse. But there's only a few robots in this story. It's mostly the lizard people that they encounter on their trip because, like, Kaya has perhaps some history with the handsome lizard boy prince who's traveling with the pack. And there's like all this lizard politicking going on between the two like factions of the lizard people who are they're all like trying to defeat this monster and go to the city, but also talking about who's leading them and why and what are they doing. And it sounds super boring while I'm explaining it like that, but lizard people fighting petty squabbles. Okay. And they all the bad guy one to me looks like Reptar from Rugrats, but like if he was punk and a teenager and like really angry about everything.
Yeah.
So that was delightful for me. And this book I really enjoyed. I thought the plot had like great pacing. There was a lot of I really appreciate comic books that give the story room to breathe, with story beat panels where an action isn't necessarily happening, but you have an extra moment for a character to like complete a gesture, or like the wind to blow their hair dramatically, so you have another moment to, as the reader, be like, that is a wistful reflective moment. So
Yeah.
I thought this book had a lot of that, that I was picking up on. Really, really luscious artwork. Looking at it, I was like, was this done in pen? Like really elegant
Yeah.
inks, really elegant pens. Like I know pretty much everyone colors digitally at this point, but I'm like, did you use a marker on this? Because it looks really varied.
Yeah.
And I just like, I do feel that the little brother character in this one was perhaps a little too annoying for me to take totally seriously as like a savior
Right.
character, but he is also the narrator. So that was an interesting tension where it's like kind of clear that the narration of the story is happening from a future place where he's looking back and reflecting, but his actions as an 8-year-old boy who's like tired and hungry and just saw his like whole house destroyed in front of him, probably realistic, but I was still very annoyed by him just making all these choices where I was like, you don't have to follow that impulse. You cannot follow that impulse. Like, and I understand that he's a literal child, and like that's actually very difficult to do. But like, kid, calm down and get it together. What did you think?
Yeah. So I feel like, well, this is an ongoing series. Like I think issue 8 is releasing soon or just released. In reference to when we're recording this, at least. So I feel like there's a lot of story that we haven't gotten to yet, and I felt like that was, I had a lot of questions. I felt like that was pretty clear that we weren't done yet with this
Mm-hmm.
story. Like there's reference made to Jin being like the subject of a prophecy where he's meant to like defeat these robots and he's meant to turn into a dragon, but it's also implied that he was being like protected and sheltered someplace and kind of like set apart from the problems of the society. So like the fact that his home got destroyed and suddenly they have to flee was seemed like kind of like a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that he is 8 years old. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good point. That's probably a
Yep.
significant reason why that was the case. But it seemed like, okay, it sounds like this kid is basically going to have to go to war someday. It seemed like he would be at least in some kind of like training or at least being kept on the news or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess just in terms of this prophecy, I kind of felt like from the beginning, Kaya and Jin were like almost meant to be leaving together for this prophecy to play out. Like again, like having this kid just in a building, safe, apart, didn't really seem like that's not going to lead to this thing happening. He's
That's
going to have to get out there in the
it's
world.
like that's not how you have character development.
Yeah, yeah. Or prophecy development. Yeah. So I feel like it was like if this prophecy is even true, which is the big question throughout this book, I feel like this setting off together was like it has to happen first in order for this prophecy to come about.
Yeah, but Jin, for the most part of this first volume that we read, is really just like so utterly believes in his destiny that he's spending a lot of time just like sitting and meditating and
Yeah.
praying and talking to the gods, and he's like, no, they're going to give me magic powers, they're going to give me magic powers because I'm supposed to, and I'm the prince, and they're going to. And his sister's like, you moron.
Yeah. I so for Junkwraith, I had mentioned that you're given the rules of the world and then they're broken. But for this one, I feel like the rules of the world are already a question to the characters. Like, because Jin thinks that this prophecy is definitely going to happen, definitely believes in magic, definitely believes that the gods are going to talk to him. And Kai is over here, like, you're an idiot.
Magic's not real. Magic is fake. Like
Yeah.
she expressly says that to him, but he's still like, "Well, what
Yeah.
about your arm?" She's like, "Don't worry about my arm." I'm like, "No, girl, what
Yeah.
about your arm?"
You're right.
It
Yeah,
glows
this
sometimes.
mechanical or magical arm that she has. Yeah. But I just like that this story kind of breaks that storytelling. I don't want to call it a trope, but you know what I mean. Known storytelling plot device,
Yeah,
and
let me
it's
just
already like halfway into the questioning of the rules of the world. So that was like unique book versus book
Oh,
observation.
I mean, I think that this story is 100% like let me open up my bag of tropes and see what we got here, but it's doing it in a way where I'm like, yeah, give me the tropes. I'm along for this ride. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
So I guess it's like there's a difference between like using tropes as a crutch and using tropes to tell a good story or at
Right.
best deconstructing a trope.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I one of my notes for this story, which I forgot that I wrote, and then I thought you wrote it, and I was like, ah, glad that Kate concurs with me that Seth is a dragon hottie. Lizard
I
hottie
do want to.
Seth.
Yes, I have to talk about these lizards.
Yes, please
Oh
let's
my
do.
gosh.
See, when the lizards showed up, I thought that they were going to be maybe there for an issue and that was it. So I was surprised that they were there for the bulk of this first volume. Surprised but not disappointed because the whole time I was like, "Oh, this is the role of the ducks in the Carl Barks Disney comics. They are people, but they look different from people. Got it. Lizard
Yeah.
people. Let's do this." They're called the Lizard Riders. They are like lizards who ride other lizards. So like
Yep.
Goofy and Pluto as the Disney dogs. One of them's a dog. One of them's a
Yeah.
dog who's really a people.
In this case, one of the lizards is a horse, and one of the lizards is a person.
Yes. So person lizard who has like kind of a thing with Kaya going has gorgeous flowing blonde hair. It
Yeah.
really has caught many feelings for her, but is betrothed to a fish princess at the city that they're heading towards. I love shit like this, Kate. This is so good. I'm like, we're halfway to Star Wars. Let's go.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I okay. So, in terms of like the lizard people as a whole, they kind of meshed into one lizard clump in my mind, and like I lost track of which secondary character lizard was which. So you've got one that dies, that kind of sacrifices himself to save the rest of them, and then you have the guy who is like in mourning about this and feels terrible and like takes on this other guy's name or something like that.
By shedding
I
his lizard
lost.
skin. That was so
Yeah.
cool. I have never seen somebody in a work of art be like, I have lizard people, and you know what? I'm going to take their lizard characteristics and incorporate that into their culture. So this lizard dude who was like the punk ass coward dude who was making life really difficult for everyone else because he's like, I'm the king, and everyone's like, okay, well, you can't hunt, so what? You're like functionally useless to us on this quest.
Yeah.
Like, so when the other lizard dies saving his life, he's like, I will perform this ritual where I shed my skin and take on his name and his responsibilities. And I was like, that's thoughtful sci-fi world building. Well
Yeah.
done. Well done, Wes Craig.
That's true. Except that I lost track of which one was which.
No.
Just,
What do you mean? There
just
was the
like,
one with the backwards baseball cap. There was the one that looked like Reptar but with eyeliner. There was the hottie one with the
oh.
blonde hair.
See, I needed you next to me when I was reading it to like distinguish all of these people. So yeah, so that's really my only complaint about the lizard people, other than like, okay, so it feels like the humans of the story, Jin and Kaya and their whole civilization, have the bad guy, who are the robots who are overwhelming the world and destroying everything.
Uh-huh.
And then we get to these lizard people, and the lizard people have an entirely different bad guy, which are like these spider creatures,
Uh-huh.
who are also overwhelming their world. So I'm like, do the spider people and the robot people work together? Are these separate beings? Is there like some kind
Different
of
bad guys.
border that they cross and they're two different bad guys in two different regions? Like, I'm confused as to who is the ultimate bad guy at this point.
We need a map. Also, in life, is there generally an ultimate bad guy, or is it many bad guys, many
True.
antagonists based on who your protagonist is?
Yeah. So I just have a lot of questions, I guess, is how I'm ending volume 1 of Kaya, at least.
See, this is the kind of thing where I know I have questions, but I'm not mad about it because I feel like with the world building that there was, I was given enough context clues to kind of pick up on, like, at the core, we're on a quest thing where we're getting the kid to safety, and everything
Yep.
else is just fun patina on the walls as we ride by, you know.
Yeah.
But this is also why I liked the TV show Firefly, where other people didn't, because I like watched that on DVD and I was like, yep, we got world building, we have context clues. Sometimes people are speaking in Mandarin and often they're speaking in English, and I'm along for the ride. They're using
Yeah.
weird words that Joss Whedon has made up. It's fine. So I don't know, stuff like that where I'm like, okay, there's a plot, there's a point of view. I like the characters. I don't need to know every single detail. It's fine. And you're listening and probably thinking, well, Kara, you didn't really know a lot of stuff about Junkwraith either, and yet you had good characters and a good good bones. So, like, what was the difference? I don't know. Okay, I don't know. I felt like I connected more with Kaya as a story, and Junkwraith I really, really, really wanted to like, but just it was just so like slow for me going through
It's
it.
true. It is really long. Yeah.
So I guess that was just like maybe a difference in pacing is what it comes down to for me.
Yeah. And I feel like the fact that one of these series is finished and we read the whole thing versus Kaya just being the volume 1 makes a huge difference, because like we've gotten to the end of Junkwraith and we can say that it ends kind of randomly and too
Too
quickly.
quickly. Thank
And
you.
yeah, and like some of these, I feel like especially with the detective, like it feels like some of the subplots didn't really pay off. But with Kaya, it's like I have all these questions, and I have some trust that it's all going to pay off, and my questions are going to get answered. So
When you said that just now, all I was thinking was, yeah, that's what we thought about everything J.J. Abrams has ever done, and look where that got us, Kate.
oof.
So,
Oh no.
I did want to bring up one thing to do a little compare and contrast between Junkwraith and Kaya, because they're both about teenage girls on adventures. But Junkwraith, to me, it felt like it was more centered on her narrative and her point of view and what she was doing. Whereas Kaya, we're told the story from her brother's point of view. Like he is the literal narrator. And so to me, it was a different way. Like we weren't seeing as much of her decisions and interiority as we got with Junkwraith. So they felt like very different stories, even though at root they were both teenage girl goes on quest. But they felt very different to me because of that. What did you think?
Yeah, I can definitely see that difference. There is like a certain hmm.
I'm making you think again. We're
You
going back into
are.
lit class.
Yeah. I mean, in some I agree. Yeah. I feel like there is more self-reflection in Junkwraith, whereas Kaya, there is almost, I feel like you don't really see her thoughts at all, which makes sense since it's the brother's narration. Um,
I guess it was more like Junkwraith to me was very definitively a young adult book, like using young adult style like storytellings, whereas Kaya was not a young adult book. It just happened to have a young adult as the main character.
yeah, that's a good observation.
All right, I'm going to make us choose book versus book.
Oh no.
Which no, we'll go down by categories. How's that?
Okay.
Which plot did you prefer?
I feel like the plot of Kaya has better beats, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, way clearer pacing. where I
Yeah.
agree with you from your previous comment that Junkwraith got really rushed at the end. All of a sudden, it was
Yeah.
like, hooray, we did it! The end, we saved it all. I'm like, did you? So-
Yeah.
well, I agree with you on that. Um, okay, here's the challenge category: art.
I okay, so they're very different art styles. I love the colors in both of them and the scenery in both of them for different reasons. But I think that Junkwraith, I don't know, it's got this place in my head as being like a very unique book, and like a work of art even more so than a comic book, and so I feel like I have to go with Junkwraith.
Hmm. I'm deeply torn because, on the one hand, I agree with you that Junkwraith is very unique, even though seeing it immediately, I thought, oh, the spire. But it's like, it's not actually like
Ooh.
really close to the spire. I just thought that because it was like future y, tech y, pastel y, but
Yeah,
the art styles are
I get
actually
it.
very different. Um,
Yeah.
and I did like the level of detail that was put into the spaces that the characters were inhabiting. There was always something to look at and to notice, and that was lovely. On the other hand, Kaya was like watching an amped up episode of the Herculoids, and I felt like I was in like the 70s watching a really good like
Yeah,
Sunday morning cartoon, but like made for adults and deepened somehow. so,
right.
so I am torn because like I want to say it's Kaya, but I agree with you that like Junkwraith is the one I'm probably going to be thinking about more.
Yeah. I was thinking about it for days after the first time I read it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which quest would you prefer to go on?
Oh no. I feel like there's less of a threat of death in Junkwraith, so
You might lose all your memories. That's pretty
that's
harsh.
true. And then you have Frank, the little Juju. He was adorable. And then you have this overland lab building situation. I don't know. I think Junkwraith is my answer.
Hmm. I am going to go with Kaya just because I'm just so intrigued by the lizard people taking us to the fish city. What's in the fish city? I want to know. Like
Yeah.
I'm a little more like curious about the stuff. Like I don't think my instinct in Junkwraith would be, yes, let me leave the city walls and go into a junkyard. But with Kaya, like I have already been forced out of my home. I have no choice but to go ahead. So I think I would do better in the, well, I'm already out here. I might as well keep going versus the initial leap to like leave everything that you know. This has been accidental therapy with I read comic books.
Isn't it always?
Like, oh shoot, more insights. Okay, didn't mean to get that deep. Okay. Did you have a favorite character in either book? I already know you're going to say Frank the Juju, so why
It's
are you
gonna,
pausing?
yeah. Yeah, Frank the Juju. I was trying to think if there is one in Kaya. Um, I mean, I feel like Seth is pretty far up there.
He's great.
He's trying to be great, and I feel like he is naturally great, and he's put in this difficult situation with his fish princess.
Yeah, I would say Seth the hottie lizard prince boy, except then he did the thing where after he got married, he runs after Kaya and
Yes.
is like, this was a mistake. And I just really wanted her to be like, bitch, you just said your vows. Like, what am I
Yeah.
supposed to do with this?
I do appreciate that, like, he does, okay, he does it at the wrong time, but he does do this big show of affection finally, or he intends to. And she's already like on to the next thing in her life.
Yeah.
She's like, I gotta go by. He doesn't get his moment. He's too late.
Oh man. You know what? I'm gonna say that my favorite character that we read in these is Kaya because I appreciate someone who is super grumpy but still doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Like she's just so mad this whole book and I'm like, girl, same. Like, it's fine. You can do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Um and is there anything I had another note about the setting, but I think we kind of covered that by my quest question. But okay, which one of these books would you be more likely to recommend to somebody who doesn't read comic books?
Who doesn't read comics? They're both so weird.
I
Like,
know, but you know, what if you're talking to someone and you finally realize, like, oh man, if this person's going to read a comic, it's definitely Junkwraith. How about like, what kind of person would perhaps like these books?
I feel like somebody who is open to more abstract like art. If they go into a museum and it's a splash of paint on a canvas that does not have a subject in it and they like it, that would be a person who might like Junkwraith.
Even if they just flip through a couple pages and say, yeah, the art's cool, but I don't want to
Yeah,
read it. At least you've gotten
that's
them to
true.
look at a comic book, guys.
Yeah, yeah. And then for Kaya, I mean, anybody that likes a a big adventure, because I feel like this touches on it's like similar to a lot of things in the way of you have to save the kingdom, you know,
Hmm.
and you have to make your allies where you can, even if they're like some of them are assholes. And I feel like that has a commonality with a lot of like movies and other media. So I feel like that, I guess, in terms of I feel like there are more people that would be into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think Kaya, I would be like, all right, was your favorite part of Star Wars the cantina scene? But you want those people to be questing. Cool. Is your favorite Star Wars character anyone who's a transition, who's the dinosaur ones that look like the dinosaur that Kirk was fighting in that one episode of Star Trek? Like, this
Yeah,
is the book for you.
yeah.
All right. So now that we've gone through our checklist, who is the winner? Which book is the winner of the book
Oh
versus
no.
book?
I feel like I'm still going to be thinking about Junkwraith for a long time. And like I'll read the next volume of Kaya. I can definitely see like trying to follow this and trying to wrap it up.
Hmm.
But I feel like Junkwraith is the one that's like kind of sticks out to me as being something really unique.
Okay. I'm gonna vote for Kaya, and I think my enthusiasm about it has carried through this entire episode, and so
Yeah.
that's not a surprise to anybody. But I do agree with you that I am gonna be thinking about the art in Junkwraith for a while. Like, it has been kind of wallpapered at the back of my brain since reading it for this show, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And that's a really nice moment for me because noticing art is something that, as you know, I try to work on. So
Yeah.
thank you for that bit of character growth in my own arc, Kate.
Well, thank you for finally getting me to read Kaya, because I think that this is on our Goodreads reading challenge for the year, and I was kind of dragging my feet.
Oh,
So,
check that off the list.
yeah.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts on our book versus book very special episode?
Really liked our little theme of ladies going on adventures, and I think that we could turn this into a part 2 with other books, or part entire new series.
Call us, Mike. We're free.
Yeah.
No, I really loved this. I know we initially struggled to come up with a theme, and we didn't even really need to have a theme, but I like the
Yeah,
symmetry of it. I like the compare contrast of it.
I feel like we have a lot of overlap in the things that we like to read. So
Yeah, so why not play to our strengths? I was actually thinking about this. I was like, what do Kate and I talk about that isn't Halloween witchy books? And I couldn't think of it, but I guess that's just an extension of this. So
yeah.
we've got a type. All right. Well, thank you to all our fabulous listeners tuning in today. You can check out I Read Comic Books on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Discord, Goodreads, and guess what? You're halfway to the challenge already just by listening to this show. We're also on YouTube. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. Infinity Shred is the best. They do our music. Zander sees all within you and believes. Thank you. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you. And a bonus shout out to Nick White for proof listening for us on this episode. Thanks, Nick.